Allan Karl, welcome to ZenMotorcyclist.com. You traveled through over 30 different countries on a motorcycle. It took you 3 years. How did you come to the point in your life when you decided to travel around the world on a motorcycle?
You know, my dream, I think, ever since being a young kid, owning a spinning globe, if you remember those, before Google Maps and stuff like that, a physical globe. And I used to imagine different places, spin the globe, hold my finger where it stopped and said, I want to learn a little bit more about that place. So as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to travel around the world. And my passions have really always been certainly riding motorcycles, but also writing. I love writing and I love photography. And I woke up one day through the realization that I was without a job, basically unemployed, and my marriage of 7 years had ended in divorce, and I was wondering, what am I going to do next? And what I did, Henry, initially, is do what I've always known how to do, and that is work, and start a new company. And that was unfulfilling, so I decided that I should really use these changes in my life as an opportunity to go ahead and follow my dream and unleash those passions.
You talk on your blog and in your writing, you talk a lot about the preparation for the journey. I think you mentioned that it took you two years or so to prepare. And you talk about the physical preparation of your bike, getting all the gear. But I'm wondering, what did you have to do to prepare yourself mentally and spiritually to undertake this?
To go on a journey where you're going to be away, and I'll have to tell you initially, during those 2 years, my plans evolved. Initially, I was simply planning to go to the bottom of Central America, to Panama. Then I thought, why stop there? Then I said, I'll just go to Ushuaia, Tierra del Fuego. And then I realized, why stop there? So I thought originally it was going to be 1 year. And then I thought I could do the whole world. I could go to 50 or more countries in 2 years. And that was originally the plan. And preparing myself for that, realized I was going to be away from family, friends, and loved ones. And maybe I was more concerned that they'd be more worried about me than I was worried about myself. So I really, needed to confide in my family and friends that this is a great thing, and I'm going to have great stories. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm going to share the beauty in the world, the humanity, and also some of the great historical and cultural heritage that you can find all over the world. And I also just needed to realize that going alone could be a very lonely experience. So preparing for that is that, I made that cognitive decision to go alone because I love interacting with people. I love meeting new people. So to me, preparing myself, I just imagined how many interesting people that I could learn from on this trip. So that's really what I focused on. I said, if I go with somebody, I am going to be less open to meeting new people, and conversations are going to be between me and my fellow rider or maybe passenger. So I think those things were really how I prepared, is just to imagine what I would learn and how much this would, enrich my life with these experiences. And I could eventually share these with my family, friends, and frankly, the rest of the world.
Did you envision, right as you started this journey, that you would write a book about it?
I always thought I would write a book, for sure. I've always talked about it. We talked about my dreams, and my dream has always been to write a book based on, a memoir on experience. And when I got on the motorcycle, started traveling around, I thought, well, it could be a book in the same, genre, if you will, of writers like Ted Simon, or great travel writers like Pico Iyer or Paul Theroux. But the more I travel, the more I realize that while I do want to write that memoir adventure story, I thought, while I think I'm a great writer and I can always improve, to share the world and to, see it almost the way that I saw it as I traveled on that bike, is to really see it, in photographs, and also to, feel it through stories, certainly in that great, genre of travel writing, but also to taste it. So that's why my new book, Forks, features recipes, at least one from each of the countries I went to, because now you're really immersing in culture there. You're tasting the local food. And this is not, white tablecloth, nice stemware, and, fancy resorts. This is like, it might be, I had goat, I had this boiled goat on a dirt floor in a hut in Kenya. Now that recipe is not necessarily in the book, but, I try to bring that kind of feeling there, and I share the story of that meal in the book. But for sure, that's what I thought about. So yes, I wanted to write a book, but it evolved into being more an immersive book and experiential.
Was cooking always part of your life, your experience?
I grew up on the East Coast in a very traditional meat and potatoes kind of environment, and part of any awakening, I think, in life, and I think this is why food is so important, and the metaphor of food and motorcycling is interesting. I grew up disliking food only because maybe I didn't like the way it looked or the way it sounded. And when I eventually, as we all grow and learn, I became open to more foods and different things. And with that came along this fascination to want to learn how to cook. I love to dine and be served in a restaurant, a nice one or a hut in Kenya. But I realized that really to understand and explore the food, that it's great to cook it. So I really evolved. I could tell you this, that the first time somebody took me, this is years ago, and in California, to a sushi bar, and I know still some people may not like sushi, but I was exactly like that. There's no friggin' way I'm going to eat any sushi. And but after time I realized that by being closed to new experiences, you're really, preventing yourself from growing further. So I eventually, finally, tried sushi, and now I swear I could eat it every day. So these things that we sometimes hold back from are just blockers in our own brains, I think, that prevent us from having new experiences and learning from them. And food is a great example of that. How many times you go out with somebody says, look, I don't like X, Y, Z. And there are things still I don't even like, for sure. But a lot of times I don't think that they really don't like them. It's just they don't like the idea of them.
In your book, you note that your mantra has always been, there are no strangers, only friends you haven't met. Could you talk a little bit, and I think you started talking about that in terms of the connection you make with people by being on a motorcycle and through food, but how did having this mantra help you through your journey?
There's the old adage, Henry, that goes, if you look for what's wrong with your life or with the world, you're going to find what's wrong. But if you look for what's right or what's beautiful, you're going to find that. And I believe that a lot of times people go at travel or business or life with lots of fear. And when we are afraid, we block ourselves from new opportunities, and therefore we can't realize the possibilities or new opportunities. So when I say there are no strangers, only friends you haven't met, I'm going at that wide open. Why do we ride motorcycles? Because motorcycles expose us to the world. We are open, we are vulnerable, sure, because motorcycles can be dangerous, but we're also expanding our view, our worldview, our perspective. So if you think about it, granted, we've all been to places where, as a Western traveler, that, we may be perceived as having more money, so people are trying to constantly maybe sell us something. And this can be frustrating and annoying. And I'm not suggesting that, you've got to be open and everything that, because that is one aspect of it. But it's just, I think, because we may have this perspective of, I've got to cocoon myself, or as I like to use the metaphor, we always got to be behind the visor of our helmet. Well, we need to lift open that visor and be open to meeting people. And, sometimes I look at somebody who's approaching me and immediately my preconceived profiling goes into saying, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in danger. But really, I just have to turn that switch off and say, no, this person's actually interesting, curious, and probably wants to know more about me and my travels in my country than I am, fearful of interacting with them. So I think that learning and meeting new people, you can only expand. I love sitting across in Brazil with a guy I met that, if you looked at him and just saw the photograph of me, you'd think this guy could, in two of his fingers break me in half, and it looked like he could, hurt anyone. But here we sat sharing a beer, and on noodles on napkins, he's teaching me Portuguese, and I am learning the language with this guy. How cool is that? Because the only way, and he didn't speak any English. We're pointing and directing, and I had a little tiny, Portuguese and English dictionary. So between that, here's a guy that moments ago I didn't know from Adam. He's on the street. He's curious. He's a motorcycle rider, actually, as well. And we are sharing a language lesson and a nice cold beer. It was about the time of day you need that, too.
Were there times throughout your journey when you had to question or doubt this mantra?
A lot of times, very often, people ask me, did I ever feel in danger, and therefore pull down my visor, put up my wall or my shield? And there are certainly times you have to be prudent, because another thing I always like to say is you gotta really trust yourself. You gotta trust your gut and your intuition. That doesn't mean paranoia. That means your gut. Does your gut say this? Maybe I shouldn't be here, and you'll know. So there were a couple cases where my gut was telling me maybe I should not be here, and I would just move on. And interesting, for those of Zen Motorcyclist listeners that are in the United States, everybody's thinking, well, why are you going to leave the United States? It's safe here. Well, one of the places that I really felt I shouldn't be there happened to be a part of a city here in the United States. It doesn't mean that, this could have happened in Colombia or Syria that I felt there. I actually did feel, like I should be looking over my shoulder one late night here in the United States on my way back. This was after the 3 years, on my way back to California as I went from Washington, D.C. to Newport Beach, California. So, yeah, there were a couple times, but very few.
Allan, you started your journey on July 4th, 2005. And then, as I understand, correct me if my understanding is incorrect, but just relatively shortly after you started, you had a terrible crash in Bolivia. Do you mind telling our listeners what happened?
Yeah, I was riding, fortunately at that point, actually with another American motorcyclist, a gentleman named Jeremiah from Colorado. We had met in Cusco in Peru, and we were on our way to the largest salt flat in the world. It's called the Salar de Uyuni. Just to give you an idea of scale, it's about 4,000 square miles, or roughly the size of the county of Los Angeles, near where I live, or about twice the size of the state of Delaware. It's huge. And so we were on our way there, but but it was in getting towards the rainy season. In the rainy season, that salar fills up with water, and you know what salt water can do to a motorcycle, so we were really anxious to get there as quick as possible. Well, from the city of Potosi, Bolivia, which is the highest city in the world, sits at more than 14,000 feet, to get to the Salar de Uyuni, you go down a couple 100-mile, maybe 300, 200, 300-mile dirt road, a barren, desolate, middle of nowhere road. And it's a gorgeous ride. You know, you carve through canyons, you climb mountains, cross into valleys. There's llamas dotting the hills. Sometimes they block you on your road, and everything is great. It was dry when we left, but we could see patches of mud. In fact, at one point, one of the very few vehicles we saw, because people don't have cars in this part of Bolivia, they're not wealthy enough, but there's buses that travel back and forth on this road from Uyuni to Potosi, and one of them had slid off the road. But we were very careful, and finally we get to the only town, more like a settlement. And this town is the place where the bus usually stops, and the road there had been rutted mud, and it was still wet and mud. I go into this town, Jeremiah's riding to the right, I'm going to the left, and my bike is sliding and slippery. You know, we've been all on mud, and the next thing I know, that my front tire sinks into the mud, my rear tire slides out from under me, I get tossed into the mud, and my motorcycle, which is a GS 650 Dakar, 400 pounds, and I got 150 or 200 pounds of junk I'm carrying with me, and it lands on top of me, on my leg, and crushed it and broke it into 3 pieces. So I lied there. This is 6 months into my journey, realizing that my dream to see the Salar de Uyuni and to get to Tierra del Fuego, the bottom of the world in Ushuaia, had just shattered right there on that muddy dirt road in the middle of nowhere in Bolivia. And I eventually had to get back to the States, have surgery. To this date, I have hardware, nice rod, and several screws in my left leg. And I left my motorcycle there in Bolivia. And that was the other thing people say. You know, remember, we sometimes look for the negative. They go, oh, what are you going to do now? Well, I'm going to go back and get that motorcycle and continue the ride. Oh, no, it's not going to be there. They're going to steal it from you. It's not going to be there. But no, it was there. And I went back, got on that motorcycle, and continued after I was strong enough.
What were some of the lessons of this experience for you?
Well, one of the lessons that I say often, and people who know me say, okay, there's Allan again, and that is that, you know, even though I went alone on this journey, I'm really never alone, because as I say, you can always connect with people, you know, and even there, I was lucky enough that there was a guy, Jeremiah, with me, who kind of helped after I broke my leg, you know, go through the, you know, crazy thinking and how do we get this guy out of here, how we do that. And, you know, when I was there in Bolivia as well, lying in the mud, it's high noon altitude sun. I'm at like 14,000, 15,000 feet, and I'm very pale. Sunscreen's my friend. And, you know, before I know it, there's 2 boys show up carrying umbrellas. And as I'm lying there waiting, because I couldn't move, obviously I couldn't get up, they held those umbrellas up, shielding me from that sun. There's so many stories. So I learned that. The other thing I learned that, and I think I knew this in preparation, but it was reinforced all the time, Henry, and that is how important it is to be patient. You know, too often I think as Americans or Westerners, we, you know, our hectic pace of life and our need to get things done always forces us to lose that ability to chill and just wait and accept things as they come. Whether it's waiting for a dish to be served to you in a restaurant or if it's at a border crossing trying to get your immigration papers stamped, you know, the more patient you are and the more you find yourself, open yourself up to that experience and to look at it as an opportunity as opposed to a pain, you have a better time and you're a happier person and you tend to smile and therefore attract more positive energy around you.
Allan, in another part of your book, in 2008, you traveled through Syria. And I think you're right that it surprised you with thrilling and unexpected joy. Could you tell our readers, our listeners, what was your expectation of Syria, and then how the reality of Syria was different from what you expected to see?
Well, I think here, living in the United States, when we think of the Middle East, and particularly places like Syria, Saudi Arabia, well, maybe less Saudi Arabia, but Syria or even Iraq, which at that time we were still fighting over there. I had this idea that it was a way to travel. I really wanted to see Damascus because, it's like the oldest city in the world. So that was clear on my list. I just wanted to really get in and see Damascus. But I went cautiously. And for those of people who have ever tried to travel into Syria over land, as an American or any country that has diplomatic relationship with Syria, you're not able to get a visa at the land border. You have to get the visa. It's on their website. You have to get that visa at the consulate in your own country. But I had been traveling more than 2 years by the time I got to Syria, so there's no way the Syrian consulate in the U.S. would give me a visa that would last for 2 years. So it would be impossible for me to do it. I certainly couldn't fly back to D.C. and go and get a visa. So they refused me entry when I first got there. So this is continuing to build up in me, Henry, that, okay, yeah, this is a problem. And it took a day, 24 hours of me basically camping out at that border until I convinced the Syrian immigration to give me a visa to let me in. And here's where the real first surprise came. As I went to the gate, and they had the old gate, big iron tube that, they hoist on a pulley up to let cars through after the papers are checked. Well, when I got to that gate, they said, no, park your motorcycle, let the cars behind you. And I'm thinking, oh, great. They're going to pull back my visa now. So I'm waiting. He says, hold on. The chief inspector wants to see you. I'm like, oh, great. So maybe the guy that gave me the visa got in trouble for giving it to me, and now they're going to say sorry, blah, blah. All these things are running in my head. Well, the chief inspector shows up with 2 other guys with a tray, and on that tray are 3 cups of tea and a bowl of sugar. And he says, look, before you go, we want to have tea with you. And he wants to know about where I've traveled and to tell a little bit about my country. And then on the ground in front of us, just the dirt ground, he takes a stick and he draws an outline of the country of the shape of the country of Syria, and he starts making little dots. Look, you want to go here, you want to go here, and basically giving me tourist tips. Here he is, the chief inspector. And then, days later, I'm in a gas station, and I need to fill up the gas, and I park my motorcycle there, and these guys invite me in the back room. Well, I think some travelers would say, no, I'm not going to go in the back room. Let's just do the gas. But as I said, I listened to my gut, followed my intuition. I said, this is cool. Went in the back room, and here these guys are eating this big salad with pita bread and, having lunch. And only one of them speaks any English. I think there's 3 or 4 of them there. And they tear me a piece of the bread. There's no, they hand me a piece of bread and a fork and say, join us. And it's not like they put it on an individual plate for you. You all share from that one platter, that one dish. And it was fresh cucumber and mint and, pita chips. I mean, it was an incredible experience, that you'd never expect to find in this dusty, dingy, smelly gas station. And then when I tried to pay for my gas, they wouldn't take my money. And, in fact, wanted me to make sure before you travel, you need to be, they call everything city. Before you go to Damascus city, Allan, you must eat. You must have strength. And, I just found that even walking through the souks of Damascus and Aleppo, I stand out. Let's face it, I definitely am very, very white, practically bald, and people are curious where I'm from and want to know and what is my experience, and they're as curious about me as I am about them. That was something that just blew me away, and I could, hardly any time if I'm having food, pay for my own food. They wouldn't let me. I mean, just really, really warm, and this is the people. I mean, the government is a whole different thing going on. So when I see the conflict and the destruction and all the cell phone videos that we can see on YouTube and in the news with the problems that are going on there now in 2013, I am really, saddened. And I think about the people I meet and how many of them are on one side of the conflict or the other, or have been injured or, heaven forbid, killed.
You also traveled through Egypt and Sudan right before the beginnings of Arab Spring, what we know now as Arab Spring.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you were traveling through Egypt and through Sudan, did you see any seeds of this uprising that really changed the dynamic in many ways of the Middle East?
I can't tell you that I saw, anything like that, except, in retrospect, I can remember particularly being in Cairo, meeting another motorcyclist and having Ahmed, not Ahmed, that was his name is Mohammed. I mean, everybody's named Mohammed, a lot of them are in Egypt. And, going to a coffee shop late at night, sharing stories and feeling this youth energy and that, and I can remember, I could, even if I was in Cairo right now, I could probably find that coffee shop. And, I could tell there was a creative energy in there and there was a youthful energy. But I, at that time, could not even imagine that maybe what is brewing here in this energy, this kinetic feeling I got, that perhaps change was looming. I can say that I enjoyed Egypt, but I will say that the bureaucracy of getting me and my motorcycle into Egypt was the toughest, most patience testing experience that I've ever had, because it's a process that goes on for days. I can tell you that. They put your bike in a holding area, and you've got to go around and get rubber stamped, 80 times it seems. It's not quite that many, but so one of the things I thought of about Egypt is like this process that people have to go through. And I can't imagine living there, even, doing something very simple that, like here we to go get a driver's license is fairly simple. You do have to wait in lines at DMV, but I wondered, what do these people have to put up with in terms of bureaucracy and the system of Egypt? That I did wonder about that quite a bit. And the other thing that I share is you're not, in most of parts of Egypt, you are not allowed to travel on the road alone as a tourist or a Westerner or as a visitor. They require you to ride in convoys, and in the front of the convoy they have a military vehicle with several people armed with guns, and then you have tourist buses, vans, rental cars, whatever, all the way down to the very back of this convoy is another military vehicle with armed personnel. And these guys run about on these narrow paved roads with no shoulders, and goats and people running back and forth constantly across the street at about 70 miles an hour. And there is no concept to the Egyptians, at least the ones that I was driving with, of personal space between vehicles. So imagine if a goat runs out in front of you, you have to slam. Well, the guy behind you is going to slam right into the back of you. And I had to get out of that convoy. So basically and I tell the story in the book, so I won't spoil it, but I had to basically run from the police. Because for fear, not was going to get shot or kidnapped or, something like this, but that I was going to get run over or somebody was going to break, and run right in the back of me. On a bike, you're vulnerable there.
So, Allan, how did completing this journey change you? And I presume it did. Maybe it didn't, but I presume it did.
Yeah, and I have to say that the journey, I think the journey, while yes, I did eventually come home, is never complete because we're always striving to learn and grow, and that's a lot of what I set out on this journey to do. I think I realized a couple things, Henry. First of all, reinforced the fact I need to be patient. Second of all, the importance of recognizing the kindness of strangers and just being mindful of other people. Often on my Twitter feed I say, we here in the United States are constantly, whether you're going into your coffee shop or going into a restaurant or going to some retail establishment where people are working, earning their living, and they all have families, loved ones, and a lot of times they wear name badges. And one of the things I realized that those name badges are there for a reason, and people like to hear their name. So I make an effort now, just because of how many people address me on my trip, when I see a name badge, I call that person by that name, and just to say, hey, I recognize you. I know that you're a hardworking person, and you've got stories that I may never know. But like I said, you're a stranger now. Maybe you're really just a friend I haven't quite got to know yet. The other thing is going back to the patience, of course, the importance of patience, and also that I don't need what I thought I needed, in this life. We have this vision of what success is. And to me, I love good things. I do like things. Camera, I love, but these are tools of expression for me. Things I like my computer where I write, and my camera where I take pictures. And certainly, let's face it, we love our iPads and our phones, and we're addicted to those. But I think at the end of the day, we don't need the things that we really think we need. And so I've simplified my life. And I would much rather invest any extra, and frankly, time is the most important thing we have because you can't buy that, but money or time into new experiences such as travel, such as meeting somebody new or trying new food, that kind of thing. And so that's where things I think have changed. I'm not trying to get the next, I don't need the hottest, greatest motorcycle. Sure, I'd love to ride it, and if that happens, great. I don't need a great, new car every 2 years. There's so many things I think that we used to strive for that are less important to me now.
Allan, if you could summarize, in a few sentences, so that may be impossible. We probably would have to read your book to find everything out. But what did you learn about the world through this journey?
We're all the same. People, humanity, whether we're economically high on the food chain or low on the food chain, whether our skin is white, red, black, or mocha brown, or whether we're Christian, Muslim, Jew, or any of the other Eastern religions and philosophies, we are all the same. We breathe the same air, we eat, and we need to recognize that. I found that to be so true that the world is full of beautiful people, and if we just look again for the beauty, we're going to find it. And I think that's really what I learned. There's so many stories that we can harp on that are of negative experiences. I was reaching out to bloggers as I launched my Kickstarter campaign, and some I never knew, strangers that I was looking to connect with. And took me, and I was like, I just, I couldn't stop going back and forth with this blogger about their perception was that we have to have our guard up all the time. And why would I trust you or him or her? And, at the end of the day, I thought, my gosh, you definitely need to read my book. Maybe come to one of my keynote speeches or open yourself up. And this person was the author of a very popular travel blog. But I think maybe in the end, I don't know, nearly about it, but maybe the type of travel that they maybe aspire to is more cocooning rather than being open.
So, Allan, I know throughout your journey, you did not get a chance to visit some of the places you hoped to visit and you hoped to get to on your journey. Do you plan to go back and go back to those, or go back is not the right term, go to those places where you did not get a chance to go? What is next for Allan Karl?
Yeah, this journey of writing this book and going on this project, as I like to say, I tried to convince publishers and agents to back me on this elaborate book that I'm doing. That it's almost been, I think I've been working on this book longer than I actually traveled around the world, maybe by 6 months, almost a year, which to me is amazing. So this has been an amazing journey. But it gets me, I got to relive everything too while writing it and looking at these photos. So now that this project is coming to fruition, I'm very excited about, like you said, what's next. There are places I really wanted to go to Iran and Pakistan. I really wanted to go to Burma, Myanmar, and parts of Southeast Asia, New Zealand, and Australia. This part of the world I didn't get to. I ran out of time. And I think it's important to note that this was less about checking countries off the list for me and bragging rights than it was about experiencing all those countries. So I made a cognizant effort to slow down as I traveled. So I won't have the luxury to do 3 years again. I can say that. But I will have the luxury to spend a few months here and there. And I hope to go back to those places and expand upon my book and expand upon my blog and continue to write and make new friends and learn about the world for sure. So Iran, Pakistan, and Burma are huge on my list right now.
Allan, so much I think of your journey was about facing one's fears. What would you say to someone who would say to you, Allan, I'd love to do what you did, but how do I overcome that fear? Something bad is going to happen, or I'm not going to make it. That fear of just completing or doing this journey.
I think for anybody that has that fear, you got to maybe start in baby steps, but you got to first of all recognize that fear. And that is, don't try to shove it under the carpet or to say things like, I don't have time, I don't have the money, I don't have this, because maybe, and there's a little bit of fear of just, number one, making a decision to go somewhere. And you can always find an excuse not to. So what you need to do is find a reason to go. And maybe that reason is, you know what, it's time for me to learn and open up and expand myself, to expand my character, who you are, because we are, at the end of the day, the sum of our experiences. And so you have to recognize, say, I am afraid, but here's how I am going to do it. And maybe it's as simple as a quick trip. It could be even in your own town. I mean, we all have places in our cities. You live in Philadelphia. I live here near in San Diego. There's parts of our great American cities that are really culturally diverse. There's a little Ethiopian community right down in University Heights here in San Diego. And it is so cool. There's neat little restaurants. There's markets. For some people, maybe they would never walk into those restaurants. I think you can start right in your own city. Is go to somewhere, a ethnic part of your own town, and go somewhere you've never been before and interact with those people. And you'll see soon how easy that is. That would be the first step to do that. And then take the step and choose a place to go. And this may be hard for many people, but I would say don't have a plan. Have an idea of where you might want to see places in that country. I always like to go to UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I like looking at cathedrals and churches. I like climbing and hiking through, various areas. So you can always identify those things, but don't sit down and book every one of your hotels at the beginning of the trip, because you will then be forcing yourself into a fixed itinerary that will prevent you from being opened and having these new experiences. I think if you did that, you can eventually become a much better and more open traveler.
Allan, you published your book and financed your book through crowdfinancing. Could you tell our readers or listeners, first of all, about your experience of doing that, and second of all, why did you do that? Why did you fund your book in this somewhat untraditional way?
So, as I mentioned, I had tried. I thought for sure, wow, what a great idea. Because I think when I first came back, Henry, I thought, okay, I could write the memoir, the travel story. But then I thought to myself, dipping into a little humility of saying, well, why is anybody really going to want to read about me and my trip around the world? I mean, that's, a little selfish, I thought. So I said, I need to give a little bit more, okay? Experience. I have great photographs. I constantly, when I traveled, people who wrote me on my blog loved the photography. And I thought, wow, I had this great dish in Brazil when I was traveling called a moqueca. And when I first got back from the States, I cooked this moqueca for my friends Bonnie and Doug. And during that night, in a bottle of wine or two, Bonnie and Doug suggested I should write a cookbook or incorporate food in it. So at that point, the light went off. So I developed this concept of experience the world, to see it in the pictures, to feel it by reading stories of connection with people, culture, and to taste it with the flavors of the local foods. And I thought this was so brilliant that what an easy sell to a publisher. Well, a lot of the publishers that I talked to and the agents said, you've got a really interesting story here, but take out the pictures, take out the food, and just focus on the story. And I had been so, I was just so committed at this point that I thought this is really the way to share the journey. I can write that other story. I will write that other story. The basic book that you could read on a Kindle or, sitting at the fireplace and reading it like a normal travelogue memoir. But I wanted to do this. So they basically turned me down. So I went at it myself. I financed the photography, because the food in the book, the actual recipes, each recipe that's featured in each country is shot by a professional food photographer. And we really focused on not just doing a typical, food shot on white with the focus blown out of the back that you see in typical cookbooks. This would have the environment and the set that it would be almost, it could be there in that country. And that's expensive, to be honest, Henry. And I also had, I took more than 50,000 photographs on this. So to find these photographs to kind of complement the stories in my library takes a lot of time, and then to make sure that, they work with the story and they look as best as they can takes a lot of work. So it got down to the point where I was ready to go, and frankly, to print a book like this is why agents and publishers were steering me away from the photography and the food, is it's expensive. So I thought, I think this is the right idea. With crowdfunding and Kickstarter and Indiegogo and these kinds of sites gaining so much popularity, that I thought I could prove this concept either right or wrong by going out to the community, to the people, just like I did in the world looking to see how people would react to me coming into their country. So I told my story through a video on Kickstarter, and I put my pictures, I showed layouts of the book. The book is basically done. I was ready, it was done. So it wasn't like this lofty idea. A lot of things on Kickstarter can be lofty, but this was not so lofty because it was 85% done. So all I needed to do is say, look, if you guys think this idea is great, for pledge, and you can have a copy of this book as low as $45. And I was amazed, Henry, because in 9 days we hit the goal. And for those of you who know Kickstarter, you have to set a goal. And if you don't reach that goal by the end of your time period, your campaign, as they call it, you don't get any of the money that people pledged to that. And that means nobody would get the book. But we got it 9 days.
Well, I wanted to congratulate you on that, Allan, because I certainly, when I saw your video, I was very, very touched by it, and to me it seemed like a no-brainer that this book should be out, and this book would be very, very beneficial and interesting to everyone. So, as part of our interview, Allan, we're going to feature some recipes from your book on our site. Do you mind talking maybe a little bit? You don't have to give the actual recipes. We'll give the actual recipes in print, but maybe if there is a story behind them, could you talk about that? Could you tell us about the recipes that we could feature?
Yeah, I would love to. You know, I'm gonna share an Argentinian recipe with the readers of Zen Motorcyclist. It's a very traditional dish. Whether it's the national dish of Argentina or not, I don't know. I mean, there's actually, Argentina is one of those countries I have a couple recipes. So I'm going to share the empanada recipe, and it comes from there's all different kinds of empanadas. Basically, it's a pastry stuffed with something. It could be sweet or savory. In the northern part of Argentina, in the Salta province or in the Jujuy province, they make these beef empanadas that are spiced with great spices and olives and egg, and you'll see in the recipe. And I went into this little town called Purmamarca, and I can't remember it's Jujuy or Salta, but it's in the northern part, just south of Bolivia, and it's got a very large mountain there, or hill, called the Cerro de, how do we say it again? Cerro de Siete Colores. It's the mountain of seven colors, and it towers above this beautiful town of Purmamarca, where they cook these empanadas, and you get them right out of the oven. They're hot, and they are just incredible. I think the best empanadas in all of Argentina. And it's fun, it's easy to make, and there's two ways you can do it. You'll see it, that you can get pre-made dough that at a Latin market, or I've got the recipe so you can make your own. And that's wonderful. And I have that in there, and in my book I share the story that all over Argentina's empanadas everywhere, no question. That I was in Patagonia where the winds were killing me and the temperatures were dropping, and the daylight faded quicker because the Andes towered so high, so the sun went behind them, earlier than we might expect. And I was freezing cold, needed more fuel, and hungry, and I went into a little tiny gas station on a remote road in Patagonia, and there was a motorcycle parked outside. I didn't recognize it right away, but when I walked in, there was a guy, an Argentinian school teacher who I had seen like 3 days before elsewhere in Patagonia. And even before me saying anything in there, he just, leans back. He's got a beard, a goatee, and he says, "Hola, Allan." And I'm like, holy crow, I can't believe it's him. And then he has a plate of empanadas. He pushes, "You look hungry. Have one of these." And So we're going to get that empanada recipe to our listeners here. And I also wanted to share a recipe because I continue to connect recipes and connect with people through the internet or through other travelers that even stop and visit me in California. Since I never got to Burma, Myanmar, I was shared this wonderful lentil recipe, curried lentils with chicken. And it's, again, easy. It's like a one-pot kind of meal, although you want to maybe serve it with some rice or some chapati or roti bread or something like that. And what's cool about it is it blends spices from regions that surround Burma, including India. So you got, this Indian kind of influence. And they also have the Chinese influence because you're close to the great Chinese Empire and even just a little bit of Africa, Middle East in there as well. And I think that that would be a great recipe to share. So we're not only sharing just a recipe of a endearing story of mine from Argentina, but also we always need to keep an eye on our dreams and our passions and what we want to do. So I'm going to share this. I want to get to Burma and actually eat this dish there in Burma, Myanmar, and also to share with the listeners and the readers here to go ahead and cook this. It's delicious. It's really good.
Well, we definitely look forward to trying it and certainly to hearing your stories and pictures and seeing your pictures once you come back from Burma. And hopefully we can invite you back as a guest of Zen Motorcyclist. Just a couple more questions for you. Your book, Forks, A Quest for Culture, Cuisine and Connections. When can we expect to see it out?
So we've got, depending on, I'm not sure when we're airing this, but this is still on Kickstarter through October 23rd, I think is the last date. But it will be, after the first of the year, available in the usual sources. You will be able to get it on Amazon. I will also have it on my website for sale. Actually, I'm making a website. It's there right now called forksthebook.com. So you can go to forksthebook.com and pre-order it there right now through the end of the year and certainly onward from there. But it will eventually be available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, Books A Million, and you can even go into your local bookstore, and they probably won't have it on the shelf because book business is changing, as we know, Henry. But they would be able to order it for you at your local bookstore as well. And I hope to have this available in most of the BMW dealerships across the country eventually as well, and probably some other motorcycle parts and OEMs. It's not so much about the brand. It's about, it's about motorcycling, but it's also just about being, open to new experiences and sharing adventures and with great pictures. So forksthebook.com, go pre-order it through the end of the year, and then it should be after the first of the year at some point available on Amazon or at your local bookstore.
And Allan, if any of our readers, listeners, want to learn more about your journey or get in touch with you, how could they do that?
We got a little bit of a bandwidth thing, so yet I didn't hear what you said, and I don't know if you heard the last of mine, but you're back now. I can see.
I think I am back. What I was saying, Allan, is if any of our readers or listeners want to learn more about your journey, about your book, about your experience in generally, where can they find you? How can they get in contact with you?
So I have a website, worldrider.com. Just one word, worldrider.com. And I'm also at worldrider on Twitter, so you can get me there. And if you search World Rider on YouTube, you can see videos from my journey. So World Rider is a great place, and then more information, as I said, on the book is forksthebook.com, and that links to my World Rider website as well. And if as I get to travel new places, there's stories will appear on worldrider.com.
Well, that's wonderful, Allan. Very, very good. I want to thank you for joining us on ZenMotorcyclist.com and wish you luck with your new book. and hope you will share with us and continue sharing with us your travels and your stories and your pictures and your recipes. We look forward
to recipes. Absolutely.
And the recipes, and hopefully sometime we can get you actually in the same room with us and just have a phenomenal meal and some phenomenal conversations. It really would be exciting.
That's bottom line what it's all about, is a great motorcycle ride and then sitting down with great friends and cooking together, sharing stories, and eating food and certainly drinking good beverages.